Hey guys, it's Ethan from Zimmer Labs, and this is a Watto's Junkyard Saber Bay Pariah V3, a Asajj Ventress lightsaber hilt set of two. This is a video that's been about 3 months in the making or overdue. I really would have liked to have finished this guy up about 3 or 4 months ago, but I've been waiting on Shapeways, who hasn't been able to produce metal parts for a long time. I ordered the metal parts for this guy right after I finished the design and the build initially, which I did with plastic test parts because I wasn't sure how everything was going to work back in February or March. And once I realized it was going to work, I ordered the parts and they came in this week, which is a couple months overdue, but I understand COVID slowing things down. But so this video should have come out a while ago, but I'm glad it's finally time, and I'm glad the parts finally came in. This guy is pretty cool. I think it's a masterpiece Profi board Neopixel build. Let's jump into the hilt real quick. The hilt is, as I said, Watto's Junkyard and Saber Bay CNC machined aluminum 4-piece hilt. This top section here, the emitter, is 1 piece, and it attaches to this middle section, middle bottom of the hilt section, with 4 half-inch screws. Then this top section here lifts off, and this pommel section here slides out. Like so. There's the 4 screws. And this top section tabs in. There's a tab at the front end and a tab at the back end. That kind of clips in and then it locks in place. And as usual, the build quality, the tolerances, the machine job is really excellent. And even without the set screws to hold the pommel on or anything, you know, this is a rock solid hilt. It doesn't wiggle, jiggle, or make any noise. And to look at it, you really can't tell that it isn't just a single piece carved out of 1 piece of aluminum. The seams are completely hidden. It's really nicely done. Has switches integrated into it. So the first switch is here underneath this rib. The other ribs are all static, they don't move, but this one has a double plunger that goes in, and then you can install a momentary switch behind it so that you can make this your auxiliary or activation switch. And then you have up top this red button, which slides down, and hopefully you guys can hear that. It's got really good action on it. And so I set it up so that this is the power switch and this is the auxiliary switch. But it's nice to have the switches kind of built into the design. Before we move on, the only thing that I want to say about this hilt, as far as a negative goes, there's very, very few. This hilt is gorgeous. But, one exception, if you want to access the internal components, you have to take the pommel off in order to get the top portion to come off. And in order to take the pommel off, you have to take out this little tiny greeble set screw thingy. And there are 2 of them. There's one for this side and one for this side. And as you guys can see, they're really small and they're really hard to grab. And the threads are incredibly thin, incredibly small, incredibly fine. And since this is aluminum, and since it's hard to hold on to, it's going to be really easy to cross thread. And having threads that are that fine on an aluminum screw, if you cross thread them even once or twice, you are probably going to ruin that part. And if you ruin this part, your pommel's not going to stay on anymore unless you want to glue it or tape it or something, or drill a new set screw. And so that's not cool. And also, you may find that you cross thread it when you're screwing it on, which means you're not going to be able to screw it off again unless you use pliers or something else, which you're bound to chew up and ruin this screw and potentially the pommel as well, trying to get it out. Obviously there are ways to do it without using pliers that won't ruin it, which is probably the better idea, but it would be nice if this was redesigned a tiny bit so that the screw didn't have such fine threads and it was a little bit easier to grab, a little bit easier to hold on to. Once it's screwed all the way in, there really is very little of it left sticking out to grab. And that's it right there. As you can see, there's less than 1/8 of an inch sticking out that you can actually grab onto. The trick I have found is to not quite screw it all the way in, which makes it a little bit easier. But there's another trick too, which, I mean, to me, one of the most important parts of doing a lightsaber build is to have the lightsaber work flawlessly and easily and efficiently, and for it to be a simple matter to open and close, and something that's fun. You know, something that you want to sit down and play with, and something that's not going to aggravate you or be a challenge. So those screws, to me, those represent kind of an annoyance and a challenge every time I want to look inside or open this guy up. And to turn it on and to recharge it, you have to open it up. To see the crystal chamber, you have to open it up. So I wanted to do something to make this easier. So what I did was, my solution was to make custom cover tech knobs that implement the small threaded screws. When you have something that's this much bigger and sticks out this much farther with multiple surfaces, it's so much easier to grab. You can grab it, you can hold it and grip it much easier. You can actually get some torque on it when you're twisting it, and you can also feel when the threads catch and engage much easier. So you're less likely to cross thread the threads if you have something bigger and with a bit more grip and more torque, so you can feel when the threads catch. And so that was my solution for that. The second solution was that, or the second issue was that takes care of one side, but the other side is still this. So my first thought was that I made a kind of decorative round greeble extension, if you will, because Ventress sabers generally do have kind of two meaty, big, clunky bits down here. One being a cover tech and the other one being just some sort of decorative bit. And that would have solved the problem. But here is the problem with that solution, is that it doesn't look good. Because it doesn't line up in a good area. If this screw had been, see, I can't even get it to screw in right now. This is what I'm talking about. This is why I don't like this design. Okay, so if this screw had been located here, problem solved. Then it would have looked good from the side, but having it here, that just, to me, that doesn't look good because it's sticking past the end. And while it's not a big deal if it's just one side and it's a cover tech knob, to me that doesn't bother me, having it sticking past the edge a little bit, because it's your belt clip. And on the other side it doesn't, but having both kind of does. So my solution was to do a one screw system. So cover tech screws in, holds the pommel on. The other one is now just decorative. I just cut the bottom end off, removed the threads, and epoxied this on permanently. So now it's just one screw for retention, and that's the good part about this being such a nicely CNC machined, nicely built, tight tolerance hilt, is that you only need one screw. It's totally rock solid, it's stable, it's sturdy, it's not going to go anywhere despite only having one screw holding the pommel on. You don't need both. So, problem solved. Now, to me, this is essentially a perfect hilt with this slight modification. The other modification that I'd made was to permanently affix the sidebars. What I mean by that is, when you get this hilt in the mail, this side bar that runs horizontal up the side on both sides here, these are separate parts. They're not attached or affixed to the hilt. They set in these little, there are little holes here, a little hole there, and there are little pegs on the end which slide under the pommel and that keep them in place. But you don't want those popping off or coming loose or wiggling or anything, so I attached these permanently with some heavy grade epoxy so that they are now attached to and basically part of the hilt. So when you take the top off and put the pommel on, they just remain in place, and that looks better and it feels better. It feels better in your hand because they're not moving around, and you don't have to worry about breaking them because the little tabs on the bottom are really small and really thin. And while aluminum is pretty robust if it's aircraft grade aluminum, but I think probably in a duel or something like that you'd end up breaking these right off. So I definitely recommend gluing those on and just, you know, getting them permanently attached so you don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to last for you. Alright, so that's pretty much that as far as the hilt goes. Actually, no, I lied. One other thing to show you guys. Ventress lightsaber is a double lightsaber, right? So, Watto's was good enough to give us this pommel adapter, which replaces the two pommels that we just talked about and goes in the middle to attach these guys together so that you have a double bladed staff, which is great because if you're going to invest, you know, the kind of money that it costs to buy these hilts and then the kind of money it costs to have them installed, you want to have them be, you know, the full shebang and really do everything you want them to do, and the double staff is definitely a big part of that. Now to the fun part. This guy, I think that ran around $900 a piece for the empty hilts. So, you know, at the end of the day, we're talking about $1,800, $1,900 plus tax, shipping, whatever, PayPal fees, just to get the two empty hilts. So I really wanted to do a full deluxe install on this guy, not just a basic one. But there is no real, at least as far as I know, there is no chassis design for this that even has a crystal chamber, and there's no fancy chassis design. The only one I know of is the Saber Project Shop chassis, which is just a really simple, smooth, curved, basically hollow log that holds a battery recharge port and a sound card and a speaker. So I started with that, and then I just pulled out all my extra parts that I had from previous builds, and I went through Shapeways. I went through everything that Goth 3 Designs offers, everything that Dimitri Stock offers, everything that I could find as far as internal metal components go, and I ordered a bunch of them, but in plastic, just, you know, to save on money for the initial design phase. And what I came up with, I think, is pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with it. So without further ado, down here in the pommel we've got a 28mm premium bass speaker. This is the Saber Essentials speaker, which is a great speaker. It sounds really good. A little bit more expensive than I think probably it ought to be, but it's definitely a good speaker for the money. The power switch is this guy. As I said, that's the auxiliary. This is a custom Saber Shop blade plug, just a simple Graflex blade plug, but I think the motif and the theme of that plug works well with the design of the hilt. You know, it's got kind of just a chunky brass piece and a big chunky black piece, And you know, that's kind of what this hilt is. It's just chunks of black and chunks of silver going on. So you know, it's just one more chunk of metal and chunk of black, and you know, all in all, it really kind of works well together. Plus, I like that it sticks out a bit, kind of like Darth Vader from Return of the Jedi has that kind of stick out blade plug style. Inside, let's get to the fun part here. Just have to pop the top cover off, and this does take a little bit of practice to get used to taking this cover off, because again, there's not a lot to grab onto, but what I like to do is just I slide some tweezers right in there to get it started, and then you can just lift it up. Inside here, this is the custom chassis that I came up with. Inside, underneath this whole section here is basically all battery, and then a 28mm speaker. Got a 1.5-inch quartz crystal with a really nice point on it, and then your main power switch, recharge port, and a Profi board hanging out right about here. And the wires all kind of run behind and in the middle in a black shrink tube. But you can't really see the wires in this guy at all, which is another nice thing. There's really essentially 0 wires that are even visible. If you're really careful and you look up inside here, you might see one. But essentially you can't see any wires at all, so that's nice. I did the parts in stainless steel, bronze, stainless steel rods, more stainless steel, and gold for the underlaying parts, and then more stainless steel on the bottom. These parts are all from other chassis designs. None of these are actually parts that are intended for this lightsaber, and there's actually a number of different parts and chassis designs here. It's not all from one saber. I think that this is, pretty sure this is for the Corbanth Kylo Ren chassis. This is maybe also, these are definitely Kylo Ren parts. This might be, oh no, you know what this is? This is the Phoenix Props crossguard chassis parts. This is from the Mentor Graflex chassis, these gold bits, and then this guy I think is also maybe from the Phoenix Props crossguard chassis. Just in case you guys are curious as what parts I used. But they've been pretty heavily refinished, polished, and modified to fit. They definitely are not in the same condition as I originally received them from Shapeways. I had to do a little bit of work to make them fit in here as far as curves and fitment issues go, but generally speaking, it all kind of fit just perfectly. If you do just the standard Saber Project Shop chassis, it's only going to take an 18650 battery and a 22 or 24mm speaker, which is fine. I mean, you could do a good lightsaber with that, don't get me wrong, but to me, a 28mm speaker is kind of the minimum that I want to work with, because the amount of sound, the decibels, the overall volume of it is just, you're going to get a lot more volume, a lot more bass out of a 28mm than you are out of a 24, and then out of a 22mm speaker. It's a huge difference. And then battery size, I ended up getting a 2650 to fit in here, which is only 2mm bigger than an 18650. It's very minimal size increase, but a huge capacity increase. A 4000 milliamp hour 30 amp battery in there. I think it's a Sanyo if I remember correctly. In fact, I think there's only 1 or 2 2650s that have ever been made. It was one of those things that started when they started moving away from 18650 into a new standard size of battery. 2650 was something that Sanyo decided that was going to be the new 18650, and then it didn't really take. I think Samsung started making 2070s and then 2170s, and those kind of took over. So 2650s are kind of a one-shot thing. The Sanyo 2650s are really good batteries, but they probably are only going to make a few of them, and they may already have stopped making them. So grab a few if you see them, if you think you might want some, because they're not going to be around for long, that's for sure, and you probably will never see anyone else make one. But they definitely do fit in here. If I had skipped the crystal reveal or made it smaller and not take up the entire inside, I probably could have got a 2170 or even a 26800 in here, and I potentially could have squeezed a 31mm speaker in here. The speaker as it is sits right around here right now. If I had been able to move it up and put it here, this is the inner diameter here is a bit wider than it is in here. If you look in there, you can maybe see that. You can see it from the outside how it dips down here. That's, you know, it's just thinner inside than it is here. So if you cut out some of the bells and whistles, you might be able to go even bigger on the battery and the speakers. All I'm trying to say. Like I said, this is a Profi board running Neopixel accents, Neopixel blade, and a Neopixel blade plug. The custom diffusing screen. There you go, you can kind of see it that way. This is the newest version of the NPXL blade plug that Dimitri Stock designed, with extra long pogo pins, just because I like them better. It seems to have a better connection if you use the longer ones. Nice and bright. Excellent shine through. And the crystal is set to parallel whatever the blade's doing. And of course, all the sound fonts are smoothswing and totally up to date with all the different begin lock, end lock, end drag, begin drag, and all the other new things that are constantly being introduced into the Profi OS. It's like it's a full-time job just keeping up with the OS updates and all the new stuff he adds all the time. But thank you, Frederick, for that. It's awesome. Hopefully you guys can hear that 28mm speaker is really throaty and really has a lot of volume in this Hilt, which is nice, because the actual, you know, the sound accuracy, the motion accuracy, and the overall volume is a huge part of the realism of the lightsaber. You don't want to skimp out on the sound. Slap the blade in right quick. Set screws on the underside. It is a number 2 or maybe 2mm set screw. You only have to give it like one good turn to lock it in. The blade array on this guy that was a Sith Seizure blade. Check out the reflection in the mirror for the actual color. It's a red Tron blade. Turbine blade. Fire blade. Although this isn't really a fire blade, it's a random per LED or random per pixel flicker blade, and it is something that Tom from Megtooth Sith actually coded, and it's my personal favorite red distressed blade. My personal favorite kind of Kylo-esque blade. It's not really a true fire blade. It's just kind of a flowing, distressed red energy blade. Nice, solid, centered blade lockup function. And then we have the Eye of Sauron blade that Fernando de Rosa coded. Oops. Which is essentially a dark orange and yellow fire blade, but it's got some other stuff going on in it. This is a standard red flash blade. And we've got really bright sunburst yellow. This is orange, dark orange, chartreuse, orange red, and back to the Sith Seizure color. And then one other thing that's cool, I really enjoy this effect, the color change effect. You just turn it on, and I think you have to aim it up or down depending on the orientation of your sound card, and then you just hit both buttons at the same time. Well, it's funny, every time I try to just show this in a video, I have difficulty making it work. There we go. If you hear that sound, that's the color wheel sound. Just push both buttons at the same time, and then if you twist the lightsaber counterclockwise or clockwise, it'll run right through all the different range of colors, and you can just push a button to lock it in whatever color you want. So on the fly you can color change. Which is just super cool. I love that on the fly option. And I guess that's about it. I'll leave you guys with one more view of the inside and also a little bit of advice. I just found the coolest thing in the world. A lot of you guys are probably going to say, dude, I already know about that. But for those of you who really don't like the new original Star Wars releases that are, quote, special edition with the added footage and the computer graphics upgrades, there's something called the Despecialized Edition, and you can find it on the internet. Just do a search for Harmy's Despecialized Star Wars. And what it is a fan-created high-def, high-quality kind of remix of all the different releases with the goal of recapturing the original 1977, 1980s releases of the original movies without any of the added nonsense. And I'll tell you, when you watch them, if you watch the Harmy Despecialized version of the Star Wars movies, they're so much better. You know, they are exactly how you remember them being when you were a kid. and all the stuff it's important, and it's really a lot better with that stuff. And the stuff they added in, it's not helpful. And the graphics they added in are kind of rubbish, and they certainly they're not even as good as the original effects that, you know, George Lucas did with flying models. Like this kind of thing right here on a green screen, or however they pulled it off, looks better than the nonsense CGI that they added into the movies later, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So those of you guys who, like me, if you're like me and you really don't like what they've done with the movies, find and download the Harmy Despecialized editions, and you will be very, very happy about that. It's definitely something I'm really glad I found out about, and I'm really, really appreciative of the guy or guys that spent all the time assembling them and putting them together. I mean, you can tell that they put a ton of work into doing it. I mean, they have subtitles, they have 20 different languages for subtitles and for audio tracks. They're 5.1 surround, they're 720p at least, if not 1080p, and they really are just as good as going out and buying a DVD, but you don't have to have all that extra nonsense. Alright, stay tuned. I've got a lot more coming. I've been building a lot of stuff and doing a lot of work, a lot of projects, but I haven't done any videos for, I don't know, at least a month now, so this is the first one of a series of lots that will be coming. And so stay tuned. Hopefully you guys will enjoy them.